Her mother told her long ago, never let a man pick your fate. But that was a dream spoken behind closed doors, when her bruises were healing and her voice was still her own. In her village, men decided everything: what you wore, who you spoke to, and who you'd marry. Eliza May Waverly had learned to keep quiet, to nod and smile just enough to pass. But inside, she held a cold little truth she never spoke aloud. She would rather burn than belong to a man she didn't choose. She was 17 and had already said no 3 times. That was 3 more than most girls got away with. The first man her father offered her to was nearly 60 and smelled of spoiled milk. She spat on his boots. The second had a mean streak and a crooked eye that never blinked. She bit him hard enough to draw blood. The third was young and handsome, but smiled like someone who'd never heard the word no before. She told him he'd find her dead before she'd share his bed. Each time, her father whipped her until her legs wouldn't hold her up. Each time, she bled into the dirt behind their barn and told herself it would all be worth it. People in their town had a way of speaking in half-truths. They called her spirited. They said, "Poor girl, too pretty for her own good," while watching her with cold, measuring eyes. But Eliza knew what they really thought. A girl like her, with no mother and too much mind of her own, was bound to bring trouble. Her secret wasn't just that she refused men. Her secret was that she didn't believe in the life laid out for her. She didn't want a husband or babies or a house with chickens out front. She wanted out. She wanted dirt roads that led to places with no fences, no eyes watching every step. She wanted to find out what else there was, if there was anything at all. Their preacher called a meeting at sunset, told the town God was angry, said wickedness had taken root among them, said one girl's defiance would rot the hearts of others. When he looked at her, Eliza didn't look away. That was the night her father told her she'd be marrying Elijah Tritt at the next full moon. Elijah, quiet, polite, but cold in a way that made your skin crawl. He watched her like he was already deciding what kind of wife she'd be. That night, Eliza didn't sleep. She didn't cry either. She went into the woods and didn't come back until the sun had already burned away the frost. It was a hard world, and she'd learned not to expect kindness. But even still, there were lines he didn't cross. Or maybe she'd only hoped that was true, because 2 nights before the wedding, she woke to hands pulling her from her bed. Her father's voice was a whisper, broken and shaking. "You did this to yourself," he said, not meeting her eyes. They tied her hands. They bound her ankles. They dressed her in white and dragged her to the riverbank. No one spoke as they built the pyre. Her heart pounded so loud, she could barely hear the wind rushing through the trees. She tried to scream, but the cloth in her mouth turned her words to choking sounds. She thought of her mother, how she'd vanished when Eliza was 12. Some said she'd run. Others said she'd been taken. Eliza never believed either story. She remembered the look in her mother's eyes the last time she saw her. The look that said, "Survive." The fire wasn't lit yet. Elijah stood close, holding the torch. "This isn't murder," he told the people. "This is salvation." He said it like a man telling a child to be still for a doctor's knife. Her eyes burned with smoke and rage. That's when she saw him, just beyond the edge of the crowd, sitting on a dark horse. A stranger, long coat dusted with ash, eyes like he'd seen too much. The townsfolk didn't notice him, not at first. Not until he rode forward, slow and steady, like he wasn't afraid of anyone there. The firelight hit his face, and Eliza saw the scar that cut across his jaw. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Elijah turned to him. "This is our business." The stranger looked at Eliza, then back at the man with the torch. "Not tonight." Elijah laughed, but it sounded wrong, thin and unsure. "You got no say here." "I wasn't asking," the stranger said, and then he raised his rifle. The crowd went still. For a moment, the world stopped moving. Eliza's father backed away, hands raised. Elijah's smile vanished. The stranger didn't fire. He didn't need to. Something in the way he looked at them all, like he saw through every lie they'd ever told, was enough to make them step back. He rode forward, stopped inches from the pyre. "Cut her loose," he said. No one moved, so he dismounted, slow and calm, like a man who had all the time in the world. He walked up, past Elijah, past the preacher, past the townsfolk pretending not to be afraid. He drew his knife and cut the ropes. The cloth fell from Eliza's mouth, and the first thing she said was, "I told you I'd rather burn." He nodded once, like he understood. They rode out of town with nothing but the moon behind them. No one chased them. Not that night. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were waiting for him to come back so they could kill him when she wasn't looking. But Eliza didn't care. She didn't even ask his name. She just stared ahead, cold wind biting her cheeks, the torchlight fading behind her. The stranger rode beside her in silence. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted. But one thing was certain. He had secrets, too. She could feel it. And something about the way he looked at her made her think. Maybe his past wasn't so different from hers. They rode west for 3 days without speaking much. Eliza didn't know what to ask, and the man didn't offer anything. His name came eventually, Cole Fletcher. He said it like it didn't matter anymore, like it was a name he'd outlived. He spoke with the kind of quiet that made you listen close or miss everything. His eyes stayed on the road, always watching for something up ahead or just behind them. Eliza noticed how he flinched at sudden sounds, how his hand stayed close to his rifle even when they stopped to sleep. He was used to danger. She didn't ask why. The first town they came to was nothing more than a crooked saloon, a broken church, and a rail station with no trains. Cole tied up their horses while Eliza sat on the edge of the well, soaking in the silence of a place with no past chasing her. The barkeep was a woman in her 50s with thick arms and a voice like gravel. She looked Eliza up and down and gave her a room key without asking questions. "Too much fire in your eyes for a church girl," she muttered. "But you'll find trouble looks different out here." Trouble found them sooner than Eliza expected. His name was Jeb Langston, and he walked into the saloon like he owned the air in the room. Black hat, clean boots, smile full of teeth. He stopped dead when he saw Cole, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe hatred. Cole didn't move. Eliza was across the room. Her fingers brushing the pistol Cole made her carry. She didn't know how to use it, but she knew how to bluff. Jeb tipped his hat to her. "You running with him now?" he asked, voice low but sharp. Cole stood. "Not here." Jeb laughed. "No, not here. But I'll be seeing you." He laughed just like that, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Eliza waited until they were alone to ask, "Who is he?" Cole hesitated, then said, "A mistake I left behind." That night, she lay awake thinking about the way Jeb had looked at Cole, like he owned a piece of him, like he was owed something, and the way Cole had looked back, not scared but guilty. Eliza wondered if this stranger who'd save her was really the man she thought he was. Maybe no man was. The next morning, they headed out again. Cole said they'd find better shelter farther west, closer to the mountains. But when they arrived at the edge of a trading post, nestled in the foothills, another surprise waited. A young woman, maybe 19, with dark hair and a long braid and a scar running from her brow to her ear. She ran straight to Cole the second she saw him. No words, just wrapped her arms around him like it had been years. Eliza felt something twist in her chest. She told herself it was nothing. She barely knew this man. But when the girl, her name was Wren, looked her way, there was no welcome in her eyes. "You brought company," Wren said. "She's in trouble," Cole replied. "She needs time. That's all." Wren didn't argue, but the air between them turned cold. She led them to a cabin half hidden by trees, small but sturdy. Inside, everything smelled like pine and tobacco. Eliza noticed only one bed. Wren noticed her noticing. "I'll sleep outside," Cole said quickly. Wren's eyes flashed. "Like hell you will." Later, Eliza found herself alone with Wren while Cole went to check the traps. The silence between them was thick. "You don't know him," Wren finally said. Eliza didn't answer. "He's not what you think." He's good, but he's done bad things. We both have. Then maybe I'm in the right company, Eliza said, trying to sound brave. Ren stared at her for a long moment. Did you choose to leave, or did you run because you had no choice? I ran before they could burn me, Eliza said. That shut Ren up, but the walls didn't drop. If anything, Ren studied her even harder after that. By the end of the week, the three of them had fallen into a quiet rhythm. Cole hunted. Ren mended clothes and carved. Eliza tried to learn to be useful. She was used to being looked at like she was broken. Here, no one asked her to smile. That made her want to. But things were not as settled as they seemed. Jeb showed up again, this time with two others. They didn't approach the cabin, just circled on horseback out by the trees, watching. Cole didn't react. He just kept cleaning his rifle. Eliza finally asked the question that had been clawing at her since that first day. What did you do? Cole stared at the fire. I used to ride with them. After the war, there weren't many choices. We robbed stagecoaches, trains, ranches, nothing small. Always thought we were hitting back at a system that chewed men up and spit them out. Then one day we burned down a place with people still inside. That was my last ride. You left, Eliza said softly. I stayed too long. Ren had her own story. She told Eliza one night while Cole slept. My father sold me to a man when I was 15. Said it was the only way to survive. I set fire to his house and walked out. Met Cole in the mountains. He saved me, but not in the way you think. He let me save myself. There were no saints here, just survivors. But Eliza started to see something she hadn't expected. Conflict. Not between them and the world, but inside. Cole and Ren weren't just running. They were hiding from each other. Ren loved him, that much was clear. But she also hated the parts of him that didn't belong to her. And Cole, he looked at Eliza in a way that scared her. Like he saw something of his own shame in her. One morning, Eliza woke to find Cole gone. No note, no sign, just gone. Ren said nothing, but her mouth was set in a hard line. He wouldn't leave, Eliza said. He's a ghost, Eliza. Ghosts disappear. But that wasn't it. Eliza knew the look in Cole's eyes when he talked about Jeb. There was unfinished business there, and it was pulling him back into something dark. Something he couldn't outrun. 3 days later, Cole returned. Blood on his shirt, a cut across his cheek. He didn't say where he'd been, just sat down and asked for water. Ren stood over him, hands shaking. You think you're fixing things, but you're just feeding the fire. I had to know, Cole said quietly. Know what? If the past was still chasing me. It was. Jeb had killed someone, an old rancher who'd once sheltered Cole during a storm. Message sent. Cole hadn't gotten there in time. They were out of time now. Jeb wasn't going to wait anymore. And neither was Ren. That night, Eliza found her packing. I'm not waiting around to be caught in his war, she said. You're leaving him? I already did. Years ago. He just didn't notice. Eliza didn't beg her to stay. She understood. Too well. When the door shut behind Ren, Cole sat on the porch and didn't say a word. You still love her, Eliza said. Cole nodded. But love don't fix the kind of wrong I've done. Eliza sat beside him. Her hand brushed his, light and uncertain. Then maybe you don't fix it. Maybe you just do one good thing and let that be enough. He looked at her then, really looked, and Eliza felt the ground shift beneath them. The cold settled in deep as fall stretched toward winter and the mountains turned sharp with frost. The cabin became more than a shelter. It became a place of quiet rebuilding, though no one said it out loud. Eliza and Cole worked side by side most days, chopping wood, patching the roof, tending the traps. What started as survival began to feel like something steadier. Not quite peace, but the shape of it. She'd catch him watching her sometimes, not in the way men back home had, not hungry or cruel, but with something like wonder. Like he couldn't figure out how she'd gotten here and how, despite everything, she still looked the world in the eye. He taught her how to shoot. At first, her hands trembled every time she held a revolver. Her father had said women shouldn't touch such things, that it was unnatural. But Cole stood behind her, steady and patient, his voice low. You aim with your breath, he told her, not just your eyes. The first time she hit the bottle, she laughed, real and loud, and it startled them both. Cole smiled, and it reached his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. They started talking more, little by little. She told him about her mother, how she used to hum old folk songs while boiling potatoes, how she braided Eliza's hair before church, how her laughter had faded until one day it was just gone. Cole listened, never interrupting. When she asked about his family, he said only that the war had taken most of them and silence had claimed the rest. But one night, after too much whiskey and a quiet fire, he said, "My brother used to hum like that too." Before we left for Vicksburg, Eliza didn't push. She just held the moment gently, like a bird that might fly if squeezed too tight. There were other quiet victories. Eliza learned how to read maps and skin rabbits, how to follow tracks in fresh snow. Cole began sleeping more than 2 hours at a time. The hard edge in his shoulders softened. Once while fixing a roof, he slipped and tore his coat open on a nail. She sewed it up for him that night. He didn't say thank you, but he wore it like it meant something. Still, the quiet didn't mean safety. They knew that. Jeb hadn't come again, but Cole felt him out there, circling like a wolf in the dark. And Eliza had her own ghosts. Sometimes she dreamed of fire, smoke choking her lungs, the crowd's silence as they watched her bound to wood. She'd wake up sweating, her hands shaking. One night, she screamed, and Cole was beside her in seconds. She shoved him back, wild-eyed, heart-pounding. "I thought I was back there," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "Not ever again." His hand was rough but warm where it touched her cheek. She let it stay there, just for a moment. Neither of them moved. The line between them shifted after that. Something unspoken began to live in the space between each look, each brush of the hand. Each night spent a little closer than the one before. But it wasn't simple. Nothing between two broken people ever is. One morning, they found a letter nailed to a tree a mile out. No name, just a message scrawled in coal black ink. "You took what's mine. I'll be back for her." Eliza stood stiff as stone as Cole read aloud. "It's not about me anymore," she said. "He wants to use me to break you." Cole didn't answer. He just folded the note and set it in the fire. That night, he buried traps around the cabin and cleaned his rifle twice. Eliza watched him from the doorway. "I don't want to run again," she said. He looked at her, something heavy in his eyes. "Then we don't." That night, the first snow fell. The world outside turned white and silent. Inside, the cabin was dim and warm. They sat close, not touching but near enough to feel the heat between them. Eliza turned to him and asked the question she carried for weeks. "Why did you come back? After you left?" Cole didn't look at her. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd left behind. You." "I thought it was guilt," she said quietly. "Maybe it was at first, but not anymore." She reached for his hand. He let her take it. They kissed for the first time that night. Slow, unsure, like they were both trying to believe it was real. There was no rush, no fire. Just two people who'd spent too long in the dark trying to find a way forward. The next few days passed in a strange calm. They didn't talk about what they were or what they meant to each other. But something between them had settled. Eliza felt stronger than she had in her whole life. She'd spent years being told what she couldn't do, who she couldn't be. Now, she was something else, someone who had chosen her own path and would fight to keep it. But fear doesn't leave just because you feel brave. It waits, quiet and patient. Cole came back one evening with blood on his knuckles. He'd gone into town for supplies and run into one of Jeb's men. He wouldn't say what happened, only that it was a message. "They're close," he said. "Closer than I thought." Eliza wanted to tell him she was ready, that she could fight, but she knew the fear in his eyes wasn't for himself, it was for her. He didn't want her to be a weapon in someone else's war. "You can't protect me from everything," she said. "I can try," he replied. She stepped close. "Don't try. Stand beside me." That night, they made a plan. They couldn't wait for Jeb to come to them. They had to act first. Cole knew an old pass where riders would have to go single file. If they could draw them there, they'd have a chance. Eliza didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl through the trees. She felt the weight of everything, of who she'd been, of who she was becoming. She was terrified, not just of dying, but of losing the small hope that had taken root inside her. The fear that this thing with Cole might be the only good thing she'd ever know, and that it might end in gunfire and blood. The next day, they left the cabin behind, rode west into the hills, hearts pounding. They set the trap at dusk. Eliza helped Cole string wire and stack brush. Her hands were steady. Her mind wasn't. Every branch snap made her flinch. Every gust of wind carried the memory of fire. They waited behind a ridge, breath low, when Jeb's men appeared. 3 of them, just as Cole guessed. Everything happened fast. Cole fired first. 1 man dropped. The second turned and bolted. The third circled wide, tried to flank them. Eliza saw him too late. She didn't think. She ran. He had Cole dead to rights. Rifle raised, eyes hard. Eliza pulled the revolver Cole had given her and shouted. He turned, and she fired. The shot rang out, sharp and final. The man dropped, a look of shock frozen on his face. Cole turned and saw her standing there, arms still raised, breath ragged. She dropped the gun and fell to her knees. He ran to her. You saved my life. She looked up, eyes wet. I didn't even aim. He held her, arms tight. You didn't have to. Later, when the danger had passed and the silence returned, they buried the men and marked the graves with stone. Cole stood over them long after the sun dipped low. They were my brothers once, he said. I know, Eliza said, standing beside him. They rode back to the cabin in silence. The place looked smaller now, like a memory more than a home. Cole sat on the porch and stared out at the trees. Eliza joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. We're not safe yet, he said. We're alive, she replied. That's more than we were before. He took her hand. You think we'll ever be anything else? Eliza thought of the fire, the ropes, the fear that had lived in her bones since she was a child. Then she looked at him, and she saw not the outlaw or the ghost, but the man who had stepped into her flames and pulled her free. I think we already are. The days after the ambush passed in uneasy quiet, the kind of silence that didn't soothe but waited. Every shadow felt longer. Every creak of wood in the cabin made Eliza sit up straighter, breath caught in her chest. They'd won the fight in the pass, but they hadn't ended anything. Jeb was still out there, and the note he'd left had done more than threaten. It had shifted the ground beneath their feet. Cole grew restless. He paced more, slept less. He rode further from the cabin each day, looking for tracks, smoke, any sign of movement. Eliza knew he was trying to protect her, but it felt like he was drifting, like part of him had already started pulling away, preparing for what he thought might come next. She wanted to reach for him, to ask him not to disappear into himself. But the words didn't come easy. Now when she felt like she was unraveling too. The cold returned harder, heavier. A blizzard pinned them inside for 2 days straight. The wind screamed through the trees, piled snow high against the door. Eliza tried to keep busy, cleaning, sorting through what little food they had, mending what clothes she could. But her hands shook more often now, not from cold, but from the memories that crept in when she wasn't looking. One night, she woke to find herself standing barefoot outside, staring into the white, breath steaming in the air. She didn't remember getting up, didn't know how long she'd been out there. Cole pulled her back inside without a word, wrapped her in blankets. She couldn't look him in the eye. Her mind had been slipping lately, and she feared what might happen if it broke entirely. I heard them, she whispered that night, in the storm. I heard them say my name. Cole didn't say she was wrong. He didn't tell her it was just the wind. He only took her hand and held it until she stopped shaking. When the storm passed, Cole left again. This time, longer than usual. He came back with a wound in his arm and a strange look in his eyes. They were close, he said. 4 of them this time. I think Jeb's found others. Men with nothing left to lose. Eliza sat down hard. So what now? Cole didn't answer. He just looked at her like he didn't know how much more they could take. The tension between them grew, thick and sharp. Neither knew how to name it. They were tired, afraid, unsure of each other, even as they clung close at night. Eliza started to wonder if she was the weight dragging them both down. Maybe if she left, he'd have a chance. Maybe if she disappeared into the mountains, Jeb would stop hunting him. She tried to tell him once, but the words cracked in her throat. Cole stopped her before she could finish. "Don't," he said. "Don't leave me behind too." Too. That word hung heavy between them. Cole had lost others. He never talked about them in full, but their ghosts lived in every scar on his body, every long silence, every empty look. The war had taken his brothers. His choices had taken more. He carried guilt like a second skin. Eliza knew that guilt. She'd carried her own for years, blaming herself for the way her mother's eyes had dimmed, for how her father's fist had found her easier than comfort, for the baby that never made it past the first breath. She never said those things aloud, but they lived inside her like old bruises that never faded. They were both broken. That was the truth. But love, real love, often begins in the broken places. Still, survival didn't care about feelings. Food was running low. Ammo too. And the longer they waited, the more it felt like waiting to die. So they made a decision to ride out, find help, or at least shelter closer to the next town. The cabin had become a trap. If Jeb found them there, it would be over. The ride was brutal. Snow still lined the ground, and the river they needed to cross had risen, choked with ice and mud. Halfway across, Eliza's horse slipped. She fell hard, shoulder dislocating with a sickening pop. Cole was off his horse in seconds, yanking her out of the water, cursing under his breath. She screamed when he reset the joint. He held her after, rocking back and forth like he didn't know what else to do. "I shouldn't have brought you," he said. "I thought we had more time." "You didn't make the river rise," she whispered through clenched teeth. But he wasn't talking about the river. They found a shack on the far side. Empty, rotten in parts, but it would keep out the cold. Cole built a fire. Eliza sat with her back against the wall, cradling her arm, trying not to cry. That night he broke. She woke to find him in the corner, shaking, not from cold, from something deeper. He stared at the fire like it was swallowing him. "I killed the boy once," he said suddenly. "During the war. He couldn't have been more than 13. Ran at me with a stick like it was a sword. I shot him without thinking." Eliza didn't speak. "I've seen his face every night since," he went on. "It got easier to kill after that. Men, boys, anyone in the way. I thought I was doing good work, teaching justice. But all I did was carve the world smaller." She crawled over, sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "You're not that man anymore," she said. "I still see him," he whispered. "In the mirror. In you." That startled her. "In me? You look at me like I'm more than I am. Like I can save you." She stared at the fire too. "Maybe I look at you like that because I know what it's like to need saving and to not get it." For a while, they sat in silence. Then she said, "I buried a child once." His breath caught. It was a girl, born too early. I named her Margaret. I wasn't allowed to hold her. They said it wasn't right, that she was born in sin. Cole looked at her with such sorrow it nearly undid her. "I never told anyone that," she said, "because it hurt too much. Because people only ever wanted to talk about how I deserved it. You didn't. I know that now. But I didn't then." They held each other through the night. No words, just breath and heartbeat and shared sorrow. By morning, something had shifted. The next day, Cole left to hunt. He came back with meat and a fresh gash along his ribs. He didn't explain how it happened. Eliza didn't ask. They were running out of time, and they both knew it. Jeb wasn't waiting anymore. He was closing in. That night, Cole found another note nailed to a tree near the shack. "Last chance. Come alone, or she burns." Cole didn't tell Eliza. He burned the note again, just like before. But this time he kept the ashes. The next morning, Eliza found the wound along his ribs. She forced him to sit still while she stitched it. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. He winced. Because you try to stop me. From what? From doing what I have to. She dropped the needle. You think giving yourself up will save me? I think it's the only trade he'll take. She stood. Then we make a new deal. And that was when everything changed. They weren't going to run anymore. They weren't going to hide. They were going to finish it. Together. Because what Jeb didn't understand was that the fire hadn't broken her. It had forged her. And Cole hadn't found her weak. He'd found her burning. They prepared for war. The first letter had been a threat. The second was a promise. It came 2 days after the ambush in the pass, left on the porch in the middle of the night, tucked under a rusted horseshoe. Eliza found it just after dawn, the sky still purple with sleep. She read the words once, then again, her hands trembling. You were never his to save. I'm coming for what's mine. No name, none needed. Cole read it over her shoulder and didn't say a word. He just burned it and went inside to clean his rifle. They both knew what it meant. Jeb wasn't circling anymore. He was coming straight for them. And this time, he'd bring everything he had left. It wasn't just vengeance. It was the need to break something that had slipped from his grasp. Eliza had seen that look before. In the eyes of the men who held her down, who condemned her to flames, who whispered prayers over her while tightening the noose. It was the hunger to see someone crawl. But she wasn't crawling anymore. They spent the day preparing, reinforcing the cabin, stacking wood for cover, counting bullets. Cole carved notches into trees to mark distance, memorized every inch of land within 100 yards. Eliza did the same. She wasn't the girl who had stood barefoot on splintered church steps with a rope around her waist. She had held a gun. She had taken a life. She had chosen herself. That night, they sat across from each other in the dark. No fire, no warmth. Just the quiet hum of the forest outside and the knowledge that time was almost up. Eliza broke the silence. Do you regret it? Cole looked at her, the lines in his face deeper than usual. What? Saving me. He shook his head. Never. She looked down. Even now, when it might cost you your life. He leaned forward. I spent years trying to forget what I did, what I became after the war. Thought if I kept running, maybe the weight would fall off. But the only time it's felt lighter is when I've been near you. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. I don't know what's waiting for us after this. I don't either, he said. But I'd rather die with you than live hollow. She reached for him. He came willingly. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some connections live deeper than touch. The next morning, the sky was red. Eliza woke first. Cole was already outside, scanning the trees. He turned to her, jaw tight. They're here. 3 riders approached through the pines. Jeb rode in the middle, his black hat pulled low, the glint of a rifle across his lap. He didn't stop at the tree line. He kept riding until he was close enough to see their faces. Cole stepped forward, rifle at his side. Eliza stood just behind him, shotgun in her hands. Jeb grinned. Didn't think you had the stomach to stay put. Fletcher. Turn around, Cole said. You don't want what's coming. Jeb laughed. You always were good at pretending you were better than the rest of us. Like robbing men at gunpoint was some kind of noble rebellion. You left us behind, and now you think you get a happy ending with some girl you don't deserve. Cole's voice stayed calm. You made your choice, Jeb. I made mine. Jeb's eyes flicked to Eliza. And you were mine first. Or did you forget that night in Dry River when I pulled you out of the firelight? Eliza didn't flinch. You didn't save me. You bought me like cattle. His face darkened. I protected you. You branded me. Cole stepped in front of her. Jeb raised his rifle. No, Eliza said sharply. She stepped past Cole. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice was steady. This isn't about you and him. This is about me. About what you did. You don't get to make me small anymore. Jeb stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You think you're strong now? That you're clean because he washed the dirt off you? You'll always be what I made you. No, she said. I'll always be what I chose to become. She raised the shotgun. Jeb hesitated. Then he smiled again. You won't do it. You still want to believe you're good. No, she whispered. "I just stopped caring if I'm good." She fired. The blast echoed through the trees. Jeb's horse reared. He fell hard. One of his men tried to run. Cole dropped him with a clean shot. The third hesitated, then threw down his gun and backed away, hands raised. Eliza walked toward Jeb. He was on his back, breathing heavy, blood soaking into the snow. He looked up at her, hate still burning in his eyes. "Go ahead," he spat. "Finish it." She knelt beside him. "No, you don't get that mercy." He laughed weakly. "You think letting me live is mercy?" "No," she said. "I think living with what you are is worse." She stood and walked away. Cole met her halfway. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into him, held her while her legs gave out and the adrenaline bled away. The sheriff from the next county came 3 days later, summoned by the man who'd surrendered. Cole told him everything. Eliza gave her statement, clear and without shame. They left Jeb in the town jail, half dead and silent. No one asked questions. People in that part of the world had learned to stop pretending justice always followed the law. They returned to the cabin. The snow kept falling. Eliza sat by the window most mornings, watching it pile high against the trees. Sometimes she spoke. Sometimes she didn't. Cole gave her space, but never far. When the thaw came, she'd ride into town. Maybe further. Maybe not. One night, she said, "Do you think it'll ever stop feeling like I'm still running?" Cole thought about it, then shook his head. "No, but you'll get faster. And one day, you'll look back and realize it's not chasing you anymore." She looked at him, soft and quiet. "Are you still running?" He met her gaze. "Not if you stay." She smiled for the first time in weeks. Not wide, just enough. The fire crackled. The wind howled against the cabin walls. And the past, for the first time, stood still. The snow melted slow that spring, like it wasn't sure the ground was ready. Trees stood bare for weeks longer than usual, the wind still biting, as if winter hadn't decided whether to let go. But the thaw came anyway, creeping in with longer days, softer nights, and the sound of running water from the hills above. It had been almost a month since the last shot was fired. Jeb was dead, gone not with fanfare, but with a sputter and silence. Cole had buried him himself, not out of mercy, but finality. He hadn't wanted the man's bones left to rot in open earth. Eliza didn't go near the grave. She never asked where it was, and Cole never said. Some things weren't meant to be revisited. The shack they'd taken shelter in through the worst of it still stood, though barely. The roof sagged now. The walls leaked when it rained. But they didn't leave it, not yet. It had become something more than wood and nails. A place where they had both broken and mended, where truths had been spoken in whispers, where fear had finally been named out loud. Eliza sat on the porch most mornings, face to the pale sun, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her arm had healed crooked. She couldn't raise it quite the same way anymore. But she could still shoot, still write her name with a pencil, even if it looked shaky on the page. She'd started writing again. Nothing grand, just a few lines each night. Memories, fragments, the kind of things you don't want to lose with time. Cole worked with his hands more now. Fixed what could be fixed. Rebuilt the door twice. Drove new stakes into the ground to frame out a garden. He wasn't much of a farmer, but he liked the idea of things growing again. Something about putting life into the soil made it easier to believe they'd earned another chance. They didn't talk about the past much. Not anymore. Not because it was forgotten, but because it had been seen like a wound that's been cleaned and bound, still there, still tender, but no longer festering. One afternoon, Eliza found Cole standing near the edge of the stream, holding something small in his hands. She walked up beside him, and he opened his palm to show her, a tiny locket weathered by time and water. It was hers, he said. She looked closer. Inside was a miniature photograph, cracked with age, a girl, maybe 10 years old, with eyes too wide and too knowing. "My sister," he said. "The last thing I had of her before the war. Thought I lost it years ago. But there it was caught between two rocks." Eliza reached for it gently, then stopped. May I? He nodded. She turned the locket over in her fingers, tracing the worn edges. She looks like you. She was better than me. You kept her close, even when you thought she was gone. That counts for something. He took the locket back and tied it around his neck with a piece of leather cord. He didn't say anything, but the way his shoulders settled after told her something inside had come to rest. That night, they lit a fire inside for the first time in weeks. It wasn't cold, but the flames felt good, like a kind of ceremony, a way to mark that they were still here. Eliza pulled out her journal. I want to tell you something, she said. Cole looked over, curious. She opened to a page she'd written days ago. Her voice was steady, but quiet. I used to believe I was cursed. That pain followed me because I deserved it. But lately, I've started thinking maybe pain is just part of it. Part of being alive. And maybe the real curse is when you start believing it means you're alone. She paused. I don't feel alone anymore. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he got up, crossed the room, and knelt in front of her. I want to build something with you, he said. Not a farm, not a shack, something that lasts. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I wanted to start here, with you. With us. Eliza reached up and touched the side of his face, her fingers rough against the stubble. We already started, she said. In the weeks that followed, they began packing what little they had. The shack had given them shelter, but it wasn't home. They talked about heading east, maybe finding a town where no one knew their names. A place with open sky and good soil, where Eliza could plant flowers and Cole could work without looking over his shoulder. On the morning they left, Eliza took one last look at the cabin. She walked out to the tree line and buried a scrap of paper there. No marker, no cross. Just a few words scrawled in her handwriting. I survived. That's the story. They rode slow, taking side paths and game trails. Not because they feared being followed anymore, but because they'd learned how to move through the world with care. They reached a town 2 weeks later. It wasn't much, 2 streets, a general store, and a chapel with a cracked bell, but it had life. Children laughing, laundry flapping in the breeze. People who didn't ask too many questions. They rented a small place on the edge of town, overlooking a hill of green that hadn't yet forgotten how to bloom. Cole found work fixing fences and hauling timber. Eliza worked in a small schoolhouse 2 days a week, reading to children who hadn't yet learned how cruel the world could be. Sometimes, late at night, they sat on the porch together. No words, just the quiet hum of crickets, the way the stars seemed to pulse like heartbeats. One night, Cole pulled something from his pocket, a small gold ring, nothing fancy. He sat on her knee without saying a word. Eliza looked at it, then at him. I don't need vows to know where I belong, she said. I know, he replied, but I still want to ask. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She slid the ring on her finger and leaned against him. He kissed her hair. There were no fireworks, no grand endings. Just warmth, just breath, just 2 people who had walked through fire and chosen, again and again, not to let it consume them. And in that choice, love had made a home.